Oh my gosh, it's finally here. Ibis's first e-bike. Welcome everybody, thanks for tuning in for another episode of our Dissected series, where today we're gonna be taking a look at the Ibis Oso. Oso is Spanish for bear, which can be found on the California state flag, but we think it might be because this thing is a bear on the trails. Ibis has made a radical departure from some of their other bikes that you could probably tell right away in looking at the Oso. There are some very cool and unique design elements which we're sure are gonna be polarizing for some, but do have some inherent characteristics that Ibis and their design team were really looking to achieve in creating their first big burly all-mountain e-bike. First up, this bike will be available in sizes small through extra large. The size small bike will have a slightly smaller battery. Small and medium also will come with a 27.5-inch rear wheel and different rear elevated chainstay. That is going to keep this bike short, handle, and a little bit more nimble. Now, something to note, although the size small does have a smaller battery, statistically, shorter riders weigh less than taller riders. So in Ibis's testing in-house, their smaller, lighter riders, which typically are 140 pounds or less, were getting the same or possibly even more range out of that smaller 625 watt-hour battery, I believe is what is spec'd on that small, whereas these larger bikes have a 750. Now, the size large and extra large have their own larger size specific rear chainstays and a 29-inch rear wheel, and of course the 750 watt-hour internal battery. Now, beyond this unique looking stay, there are some cool integration elements that Ibis went into with creating this new bike. As you can see, it's got a headlight taillight combo from Lupine, which is a really neat feature. And when we first got it, we are a little uncertain as to how often we'd use it, but the days are getting shorter, and all of a sudden we really started realizing, like, this has us excited to look for excuses to go for quick little rips after work, whether commuting to or from work and taking some little off-road connectors on the way. Something else that we thought was pretty cool and forward-thinking as e-bike racing is becoming more prevalent, this battery is very quickly removable. There's not a lock or key needed. There's simply a side access door, and an Allen key or hex wrench will remove that battery. So in some of those higher paced, high stressed e-race environments, you don't have to flip the bike over, drop the battery out of the side. You don't have to remember to have a key. Simply pull that door open, or that cover, I should say, pop that battery in, do a swap, and you're off and running. Very cool, I think, and something that I think is a little bit of a nod to the future of e-biking and e-bike racing. Another new feature for the Ibis is their first time using an upper link to drive that shock on that DW Link suspension. Again, it is a 155 millimeter travel rear end. However, you can increase the shock stroke length by 5 mil, going from a 60 to a 65 mil stroke shock, and increase the travel up to 170 millimeters. Also up front, you can run a dual crown fork on this up to 190 millimeters of travel. So if you want to up that rear travel, put it dual crown 190 up front, this thing is definitely ready to shred. So with that being said, let's go hit a little more time on the trails and get to know the Oso and share some more thoughts. Before we get too farther into this, let's take a look at the Geo on the Ibis Oso. Our size large sports a 500 millimeter reach with 444 millimeter chainstays. Each size sees a pretty significant jump in the reach numbers, and the large and extra large share that 444 stay, while the small and medium sizes share a 439 millimeter stay. Seat tube angles also change throughout the size range, with a small mediums running 77 degrees, our large has a 78, and the extra large sports a 79. Ibis's theory with changing the seat tube angles, as many other brands are doing, is to maintain comfort, performance, and agility of the bike. As you can imagine, as seat posts get longer and longer, rider weight shifts closer and closer to that rear axle, and the farther back your weight goes, the more likely you are to get that front end off the ground, which is not what you want to do on such a capable e-bike, especially when you're trying to climb up some really steep hills to get to your favorite downhill trails. Up front, the bike has a 64-degree head tube angle with a 650 millimeter stack height. The The bottom bracket drop is 31 millimeters on our size large and an overall wheelbase of 1,294 millimeters. Overall, Ibis has given the Oso a pretty capable and standardized geometry setup, excluding possibly that kind of long reach number, but we'll find out how that does in our long-term review. Obviously, there's lots of riders that are aching for longer and longer reach bikes. Maybe we're stuck in the past, but we tend to like a little bit shorter bike. So far, so good. Let's get into some more of the ride traits and the descending capabilities, which of course, is our favorite part to talk about when it comes to e-bikes.
All right, so it is incredibly dry and loose, but one thing I will say, this bike likes to be ridden very aggressively. It likes to be pushed and told what to do.
Next up, let's discuss some of the electronics and Bosch equipment found on this bike.
So this is a pretty technical little loose section, kind of a steep, sharp right with a hard left after. Probably doesn't look like much, but it's a little tricky. And bike felt good. The Bosch unit, obviously, incredibly powerful. We definitely like the Bosch stuff a lot. Everything kind of has pros and cons and unique characteristics, but overall the Bosch stuff performs well. Definitely has a lot of power.
So if you've seen the channel much, you'll know that in previous year e-bike shootouts and lots of other individual tests, the Bosch system is definitely very high on our crew's scoreboard. Unfortunately, we didn't get this bike until just a couple of days before the embargo lifted. The Bosch system on our bike was not updated, so it sadly led to us spending quite a bit of time troubleshooting, diagnosing before we were able to get into a dealer in town and get all of this situation updated with current software. Long story short, it led to us not having a lot of time to ride the bike before this video went live, and it was a little bit of a pain, but we're confident that based on our experience on Bosch equipped bikes in the past, now that everything's updated and set to go, we likely won't see any other issues during our time testing this bike. Obviously, you know, Bosch has some incredible power, great speed. It has a lot of really cool things that we like about it and was part of the reason why Ibis chose to use this platform. The lupine lights, very cool as we're starting to lose light here on our film day. The 900 watt-hour light is probably not enough to go out alone on some really gnarly aggressive night missions, but it's certainly enough to get you out as the sun goes down or if you're commuting to and from the trail. I think in conjunction with a really nice helmet lamp, this is gonna extend some night rides into some dark hours and offer a whole lot of fun. So how does this bike ride? Let's get into it. First and foremost, it's a pretty progressive bike. It's the most progressive bike Ibis has ever made. They did that because they wanted it to be coil shock compatible. There are some very limited Fox only coil shocks, I believe, because of this kind of narrow clearance. So make sure you head to the site and check that specification out if you do want to do a coil swap. You do have to spend a little bit of time, which sadly, again, we didn't have before getting this video out, to tweak and tune the shock. You know, Ibis suggested that we start out with 17.5 millimeters of sag on the bike, and that's exactly what we came out with. But again, based on the conditions in the trail today being so loose and so dry, we don't have like high traction G-inducing berms and big drops off of, you know, jumps or anything like that to blow through that travel. I think we're gonna have to come back out and possibly run like 19 millimeters of sag just to help us get through all of that travel and sit into the suspension a little bit deeper. What I noticed that initially when I was just kind of learning the bike, I was still a little bit timid, unsure, getting used to everything. I wasn't totally thrilled just yet. It felt like it was kind of stink bugging a little bit. I didn't feel like the traction was all that great. Granted, you know, it's the dry desert. But as soon as I dropped into one of our kind of go-to downhill tracks and the camera was out, I dropped in at speed and was actually kind of blown away. The brakes weren't fully bed in, so I was coming in a little hotter than I wanted to, but that moment of speed and almost like that tethering, that line of out of control, showed me where this bike wants to be ridden, and that is hard and fast. After that, I went back up, I bed the brakes in a little bit more, and I said, you know what? Just send it. And that was when I really started to see this bike come into its own. I was instantly feeling better, faster, more confident. You know, obviously something to note is like, not everybody wants to ride that way all the time. And that's where, as we spend more time in our long-term review, we'll see what airing down that suspension feels like, possibly what slowing down some of the, you know, low speed rebound might help do to kind of settle that bike in a touch more. But I will say that if you've got the terrain and the traction and you've got berms and jumps and drops, this bike feels like it's going to be a ripper. Anytime we had a chance to let this thing open and had a couple of catch berms or some really chunky rock gardens, like, it really started to shine. I wish we had more time on it before this came out, but rest assured, we are excited about this bike and are gonna spending more time on it, fine-tuning it and working on some better information for you guys in the long-term review. But again, with all of our dissecteds, our goal is to let you guys see from, you know, our perspective, the new tech, the new bike design, and kind of some of our initial impressions. So what do you guys think about how this bike looks? I dig it. It's crazy, it's wild, it's unique, but I'm a fan. I think there are some really neat features going on in here. It's pretty dang stiff, it rides well. I'm excited about this bike. And I'd love to hear what you guys think. Is that a deal breaker right back there? Or are you guys digging it? Let us know in the comments below. Also, please let us know what you would like us to focus on for the long-term review, what things really want, or what things stand out to you that you would like to know or know more about before making a decision on something like this. Thank you guys very much for watching. We appreciate it. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It would mean a lot to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you out on the trails.